And with that, let's go now to Trey Yingst back in Tel Aviv, where he has the latest. And Trey, we understand you have brand new reporting from the White House. What can you tell us?
Yeah, guys, good morning. I just spoke with President Trump for 15 minutes. He gave me some new details on the negotiations behind the scenes with the Iranians and what's going to happen if Iran does not make a good faith deal. The president tells me if they don't make a deal and fast, I'm considering blowing everything up and taking over the oil. The president went on to say you're going to see bridges and power plants dropping all over their country. Now, I asked him about the possibility of an agreement with the Iranians. He says those who are negotiating on behalf of Iran have been granted amnesty at this time so they can continue the talks. And the president tells me he thinks he'll be able to get a deal by tomorrow. He says, I think there's a good chance tomorrow. They're negotiating now. All of this following the president's post on Truth Social, where he talked about these negotiations with the Iranians. We'll pull this up. He says, quote, Tuesday will be power plant day and bridge day, all wrapped up in one. In Iran, there will be nothing like it. Open the effing straight, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. Praise be to Allah. The president posting there on Truth Social about this ongoing operation and his new red line for the Iranian regime. Now, the president also provided new details on what happened earlier this year as the Iranian regime took to the streets and slaughtered what the president tells me is 45,000 civilians in their own country. After that took place, President Trump told me the United States sent guns to the Iranian protesters. He tells me we sent them a lot of guns. We sent them through the Kurds, and the president says he thinks the Kurds kept them. He went on to say we sent guns to the protesters, a lot of them. And so a number of headlines here from my conversation with President Trump. All of this taking place more than a month into Operation Epic Fury and in the aftermath of that successful U.S. operation overnight to rescue that stranded U.S. service member inside Iranian territory. The president himself ordering that operation after the CIA came on Saturday morning and confirmed that they located where this crew member of an F-15 that was shot down on Friday was located. Again, the president making that decision to send in hundreds of U.S. special forces deep into Iranian territory and successfully retrieving that U.S. service member. Guys?
I want to make sure I got this correctly. Are you saying that the president told you that he sent guns, the U.S. government sent guns to the protesters via the Kurdish, but the Kurdish kept some of the guns?
Correct. The president tells me that the United States sent guns to the Iranian protesters earlier this year. He says we sent them a lot of guns. We sent them through the Kurds, and he thinks that the Kurds kept them. Remember, the president made a commitment to the Iranian protesters who were in the streets of their country earlier this year. Those images were circulating online of thousands of people who were slaughtered at the hands of the Iranian regime, the current regime that is attacking U.S. forces as we speak. And the president made a commitment on Truth Social to those protesters, and he said help is on the way. And we are learning as a result of this call with President Trump that he attempted to send guns to these protesters in order to fight back and defend them. Remember, these were peaceful demonstrators who were protesting against their government, and they were met with live ammunition from the Iranian regime in the streets of their country. They were slaughtered. And Fox News was talking to people in Iran who were using Starlink, and they were describing these horrific scenes in the streets of their country. And the president, again, told them that support and help was on the way. And so it appears that was the help the president was talking about. And again, as all of this is taking place, now that we zoom out 3 months later, the president is offering the Iranians a diplomatic solution to end this conflict. The same offer that he gave the Iranians before Operation Epic Fury began.
Exactly.
And remember, we know that at the negotiating table before this operation began, the opening position of the Iranian regime is that we have 460 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, enough to make 11 nuclear bombs. And the president, understanding the country's ballistic missile program and their nuclear aspirations, ultimately ordered this operation. Well, more than 35 days later, the president once again is offering the Iranians a diplomatic solution. And again, he tells Fox News in a phone call earlier today, he thinks he'll be able to get a deal with Iran by tomorrow. He says he thinks there's a good chance tomorrow. They are negotiating now. But again, the president goes on to tell me you're going to see bridges and power plants dropping all over their country if they're unwilling to make a deal.
So incredible reporting, Trey. But it's interesting because President Trump told you that he was thinking optimistic, it sounds like, that there could be a deal tomorrow. But did you also sense a frustration in his talking about the negotiations? Because Iran has never changed their tune. They so far have yet to show any inkling of good faith negotiating, but maybe something has changed in the last 24 hours?
The short answer is no. It doesn't appear anything major has changed as it relates to the way that the Iranians are negotiating. What's changed is the increase in pressure that continues. President Trump ordered, remember, a strike against the B-1 bridge, a new bridge in Iran that the Iranians, according to intelligence officials here, were going to use to transport military equipment. And he told me on the phone that as he was trying to get a deal, the Iranians were trying to push off the negotiating timeline, saying next Tuesday we'll meet, for example. And the president said, no, next hour, because this is a president who wanted to get a deal. He wants to get the job finished. And ultimately, the Iranians were trying to stretch out that negotiating timeline, and the president ordered the strike against this critical infrastructure in Iran, again, to send a message that the United States is not playing games on the battlefield or at the negotiating table. And so the sense that I got from President Trump is that he is very serious as it relates to these threats against the Iranian regime when it comes to their unwillingness to make a good faith agreement, despite the fact that the president has given them multiple off-ramps. And again, he tells me that he ideally will take Iranian oil if they are unwilling to make an agreement. And so that is a major development in this conflict. And the president making very clear in his post on Truth Social that Iranian power and energy infrastructure will be targeted in the days ahead if Iran doesn't make a deal tomorrow.
Based on your conversation then, Trey, especially when you consider there has been no evidence whatsoever that the regime is trustworthy. They make deals all the time. They say things all the time, and they never, ever, ever follow through. Was that your sense in listening to the president? And if that's so, it seems to me like 24 hours from now, we're going to hear a lot more about bombing.
Yes, the president understands the deal very well, based on what I gathered from the conversation. And he said primarily we're talking about the Strait of Hormuz being opened.
That's right.
Again, the Iranians have these small vessels where they use mine laying vessels, for example, to try and disrupt billions of dollars worth of oil trade through the strait. And it's something that they can continue to do, and it's very inexpensive for Iran, but can be very expensive for the international energy markets. And the president understands this. And so the primary thing that he talked about was the Strait of Hormuz. He also said there are 15 other points, but he does believe that he'll be able to get an agreement with the Iranian regime. I think the important part here, too, is the negotiating team that the president has. We're talking about U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. If you think back to last year, the entire region didn't think a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas was possible. And ultimately, the president was able to send his special envoy to the region, send Jared Kushner to the region, and go to Egypt and get a deal that everyone said wasn't possible. And I think that that is the sentiment now. Ultimately, there will be some sort of negotiated settlement. The president's really just giving the Iranians a chance right now in order to stop things right here, because the United States has more U.S. forces in the region. The president's been very clear he's willing to move more forces to the Middle East if needed, but there are already tens of thousands of U.S. forces currently in the Middle East. And as we saw last night, U.S. Special Forces have the ability, hundreds of them, to go into Iranian territory to conduct operations and successfully leave the country without anyone being killed or very serious injuries happening to those forces. And again, this is also a message of deterrence, I am told. I spoke with a senior U.S. official earlier today who said only the United States of America has the capability to do what is being done right now in Iran. And the president has a variety of options on the table to choose from as it relates to how this conflict is going to move forward. And as we talked about earlier, it appears the president is giving the Iranians until tomorrow to make a good faith agreement, or there will be a price to pay, according to the president, and that will be Iran's power grid and bridges. And he even described it to me as power plant day and bridge day, because he said this will be a concerted effort to strike at the heart of the regime and their infrastructure if they're unwilling to come to the table and make a good faith deal.
Well, Trey, your report gives me a lot of hope. I mean, we've all been praying for peace and hopefully a negotiation, a way out of this. Did the president give you any indication as to who is leading these negotiations? My understanding is that last week, the Iranians said, we want to deal with J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance was beginning negotiations with somebody on the Iranian side, and then that person we killed, and I think, or injured, and then some of his family was killed, if I'm correct. Correct me if I'm wrong. So who is leading the negotiations, and who are they negotiating with? Because part of the problem is if you kill so many of the leaders, you're not left with a lot of people to negotiate.
Yeah, I want to be careful with my reporting here, but I can tell you I spoke with President Trump both on and off the record. We talked for about 15 minutes.
I understand.
And he told me that the current negotiators from the Iranian side have been granted limited amnesty right now. They're not going to kill them as these negotiations continue. And that's something that the Iranians requested, and the president was willing to grant, given the fact that he is controlling the scope of these negotiations right now. But I think the president also talked about how the Iranians are negotiating. And this was the thing that I drew from the conversation, is that the Iranians like to drag their feet in these negotiations. And the president basically, through that strike on a key bridge in Iran last week, was trying to send a message to them that they're either going to make a deal or they're going to face consequences for not making a deal. And so, again, the president told me that the Iranians were trying to push off the negotiations an additional week and a number of days ahead. And the president said, no, next hour you're going to negotiate. Because, again, this is a president who is directly involved and speaking on a daily basis with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, with his son-in-law Jared Kushner, because they understand the framework of this deal. They also understand how the Iranians negotiate. And they're not negotiating in good faith, despite the fact that the United States is giving them this off-ramp.
Right.
We have seen this in the past. We saw this during previous administrations. And the difference with this administration is that the president is not willing to let them drag it out. He's saying, if you're going to make a deal, you need to make it, as he told me, tomorrow, not next week.
So the clock is ticking. Trey Yingst, great reporting.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Trey.
I'm
बढ़ता ही जा रहा था ना